Hello everybody, Tim Norris here, aka GreyElephant, coming to you from GreyElephant Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at the expansion to Legacy Gears of Time, Legacy Forbidden Machines. If you are familiar with the setup and the gameplay of Legacy Gears of Time, I would ask you to still pay close attention. There are no fate cards in this deck. Instead, you have free actions or when-established abilities. Why don't we take a look at what you got? Legacy Forbidden Machines works exactly the same as Legacy Gears of Time, with a few exceptions to the way that the cards are played. Now, if you know how to play Legacy Gears of Time, a lot of this will seem familiar, but for those of you who have not played Legacy Gears of Time, I'm going to take you through the setup of the game. First off, lay your board out. This is set up the demonstration for a two-player game. It's what I'm most familiar with. You would then take your timeline and place it on the board as such. You would take the present day marker, put it on the board, and each player would select a pawn of their color and place it on the present day marker. We have our turn and round markers, represented by gears, that we'd place on the respective areas on the board itself. Then each person would take two of their influence cubes, and you'd place one for the score tracker up here, and then the other one would be placed for initiative marker. Right now, yellow player would have initiative because he's at the top of the track. Then, depending on where you're on the initiative tracker, depends on how many cards you would start with. For instance, if you're the first player on the initiative track, you would start with 6 cards in your hand. Each person below you would get one additional card plus one. For instance, the blue player here would get 7 total cards. Then this person would be 8, then this person would be 9. It's important to remember, this is only for the first round of the game that this takes place. Gameplay of Legacy Gears of Time and Forbidden Machines takes place over the course of 4 rounds. Each round consists of 4 turns. Each turn consists of 3 actions. So, to put it better, each turn would give you 3 actions for each round total of 12 actions, and at the end of the entire game, you would have performed a total of 48 actions, give or take, depending on what cards you decide to play. So, why don't we demonstrate on how you actually perform actions? Actions consist of moving backwards in time. It's important to remember that you can never move forward in time once you go backwards, but you can move far back as you like for one action. So for instance, if the yellow player did move all the way from the present day marker to the 4th time frame, that person would never be able to go back up here until the end of the round. Another action that you could possibly perform is to draw 2 cards from the top of the deck here. You would be able to look at both of them, decide which one you want to keep, while discarding the other one. Another action that you could possibly take is building a technology in any one of these time frames, which we'll demonstrate how that works here in just a minute. The last action you could possibly take is adding influence cubes to any one of the technologies that have been currently built, which once again we will demonstrate here in just a minute. Let's take yellow player's turn completely through to show just how 3 actions could be performed in a particular turn. Let's say the yellow player decides to move back to the 3rd timeline here. That would consist of 1 action. Now let's say that the yellow player decided that they wanted to build one of their technology cards that are in their hand. Now how this works is, the first thing you would do is look at these numbers that are here listed on the side. And the reason is because anytime you want to build a technology, you must discard the amount of cards that is listed right here on the left-hand side of the card. So for instance, yellow wants to build this card right here. If you're required to be able to do that, you would have to discard 2 cards out of your hand. Once you place it down, decide which 2 cards you wish to get rid of, and discard them on top of the discard pile, just like that. That would have consisted of the second action for this turn. The other thing you would do, for every card that you discarded, you would add 1 influence cube of your color onto that technology. Now, yellow has one more action that they could possibly take. Yellow decides to move backwards 1 extra time to the 4th time frame. That would be the entire turn that yellow could possibly take. And then it would move over to the blue player's turn. So why don't we demonstrate how the blue player could possibly take their turn? So the blue player could decide to move backwards in time for 1 action. Then he can decide to build a technology. Now it is important to keep in mind why we have numbers here at the top of the time frame.
Those numbers represent how many technologies can exist in each timeline. For instance, where the blue player currently is, only one technology could exist here, but this will change as the game progresses. So the blue player could look at his cards and decide if he wishes to build a technology out of his hand. He decides he wants to build the expansion dome. Now the expansion dome would require him to discard 2 cards out of his hand. We also have a list of dependencies which would be required to make this card successful. If it is, he would gain this many legacy points at the end of the round. Notice that we have some other text listed down here at the bottom that was not listed on the other card that the yellow player played. This is possibly a free action that the blue player would be able to take advantage of if the expansion dome was successful. Because the expansion dome has dependencies that have not yet been invented, you cannot take advantage of this free action. To be able to take advantage of this free action, all the dependencies would have already needed to exist to make the expansion dome successful, and you would have to be in the exact same timeline as where the technology is, where you're wanting to take advantage of that free action. So let's say he did build the expansion dome. He would have to then pick 2 cards out of his hand that he would discard. Now, what he's going to try to do is concentrate on these dependencies that were listed, and he does happen to have those in his hand. So you'd want to keep those and discard the ones you would not need and put them on top of the discard pile. Now, he would still have another action, so he can decide if he wants to draw 2 cards, look at them, keep the one he wants, and discard the other one. Now, the blue player should also have taken 2 of his influence cubes and placed it on the expansion dome, just like the yellow player did here with the ballast. Now that each player has taken all 3 of their turns, you would move the turn indicator marker forward 1, showing that there's only 3 turns left for this round. Now, let's say that the yellow player, it's his turn now, and he decides that he wants to build again. Now he could go ahead and build the helix. The helix is a fundamental, which means that there are no dependencies. It can exist all on its own. And notice that it also has the little lightning bolt. And what it says is you can swap the influence cube with any influence cube on any other technology. So because it's a fundamental, requires no other cards or technologies to exist, the yellow player could play this card and immediately take that free action by discarding one of his other cards, placing his influence cube on it, and then if he decided to, he could swap it with the expansion dome influence cube of the blues, just like that. Now, blue would own the helix now, and the expansion dome does not yet actually exist because its dependencies have not been fulfilled. However, that is an action you could possibly take with the helix, and that is probably my favorite card, by the way. Now what I want to do is instead of taking you turn by turn, I want to show you what the game would look like once it's all set up at the end of an entire round. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pause. I'm going to put out a bunch of technologies here, and we're going to show what happens at the end of a round. This is the end of the round. Notice that I moved our turn marker all the way down to the end. We're going to first take our 2 players and we're going to place them on the present day marker, and we're going to slide that up 1 notch just like that. We're now going to slide this bar up, and notice now that we've got the 2 lined up where the 1 used to be. Then we're going to take the next number in the timeline and we're going to place that on the end. Notice how we just now increased the amount of technologies that could be possibly built in each time frame. Let's move our turn marker all the way back to the beginning, and let's move our round marker up 1 to signify that it is about to begin round 2. However, we still need to score. Notice that the yellow player moved up 2 points. Why was that? Because the yellow player built one of these cards called gem cutting. And gem cutting is a fundamental, which means it requires no dependencies to exist. And for a free action, yellow player was able to gain 1 legacy point each round or each turn. Now remember, it's very important to remember, you get 1 time per turn that you can take advantage of one of these actions. You can never do more than any one type of action. So for instance, if you did take advantage of this one, you could not take advantage of the helix as well on the same turn. For instance, the card I just showed you with the gem cutting where yellow gained the legacy points. If by chance the blue player even tied the amount of influence that was on the gem cutting, then the yellow player nor the blue player would be able to take advantage of the free action. You must have the most influence cubes on that technology for you to be able to take advantage of the action. Now let's get into scoring. Scoring happens at the end of each one of the rounds. And the first thing that you would do is you're going to go across the board and let's see if any cards repeat themselves. For instance, we have 2 cards out here that are the Celestial Ballast. The yellow player owns one and so does the blue player. Now what you're going to do is you're going to look for the earlier one. For instance, the yellow player exists in this timeline which is earlier than this one here. So therefore, because they do repeat, they are the same type of technology, then you would remove this one from the board and all the influence cubes off of it. The next thing you would do is you would see if there's any technologies that don't have any influence cubes on them. Currently right now with the first round there are influence cubes on all of them. But let's say that the Helix did not have an influence cube. If that was the case, at the end of the round the Helix would have been removed out of the game. Now what you're going to do is go into the actual scoring of the game. So the expansion dome, for the expansion dome to be successful and to score 5 legacy points, it would require the dependencies, a hollow lattice, which does exist, a helix, and a wind harness. So because all of the dependencies do exist for the expansion dome is deemed a successful technology. However, notice that the yellow and the blue player both have 1 influence cube on it. So what that means is that they're going to split the legacy points, rounded down. So each player would then get 2 legacy points added to themselves on the score tracker. They would also be able to take their influence cubes off of that and place them in front of them. This is going to start creating their pool that they're going to be able to use to influence technologies in the future rounds. So now we would look at the fact that there were dependencies on the card, that the hollow lattice. Now we've scored them points, but we would go to the hollow lattice, which is a dependency, and notice that it also scores points. The blue player has the most influence on the hollow lattice, so he would score an additional 3 points because he supported the expansion dome. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to go over here and he's going to score for the hollow lattice again 3 points. 1, 2, 3. So sometimes it's not always beneficial to have the most influence on one of the more expensive cards as much as it is the dependencies required to support that expensive technology. So then he would also take his influence cube off of the hollow lattice and add it in front of him. Notice that the hollow lattice, for it to be able to exist, it would have required a helix and a wind harness. And as long as they have these numbers next to them, then that means that they score as well. So we'll look over here. Who owns the helix? The blue player again. So the blue player would score 2 additional points on the board. The wind harness is owned by the yellow player. So the yellow player would score 2 bonus points as well. The Celestial Ballast. We removed the one that the blue player had, but the yellow player then would score 2 points for the Celestial Ballast, and the blue player would score 2 because it requires a helix for the Celestial Ballast to exist. The Ocean Siphon. The Ocean Siphon is worth 4 points and requires a wind harness, so the blue player would score 4 points for owning the Ocean Siphon, and the yellow player would gain 2 points for having the dependency required for the Ocean Siphon to be successful. Then we go to the Helix, which would score 2 for blue, which is a fundamental. The Wind Harness is a fundamental, which would score 2 for yellow. And then Gem Cutting, which would score 2 for yellow as well. Now we would begin round 2. Now at the start of the next round, each person would draw back up to 6 cards in their hand. And then we would also determine the initiative order again by the amount of influence that's in each player's pool. Well, each player has 4 influence cubes in their pool. So because they're tied, what you would then look at is the legacy points. Because yellow is further back and blue's ahead, then yellow would determine whether he wants to go first or second on the initiative track. Now remember, that does not mean that yellow's going to be able to draw an additional card. That only happens in the first round. So yellow could swap, forcing blue to be the first player. And trust me, there are advantages by going second. Now each player would make sure they had at least 6 cards in their hand, and then round 2 would begin. Each player then would be traveling back in time again, trying to establish technologies to try to build upon what they've already established. Now it is important to remember that you can never have the same type of technology existing in the same timeline. For instance, remember when we had our Celestial Ballast? It existed in a separate timeline. Though it was removed, it could not legally ever be built in the exact same timeline. Now remember how we built the helix here and we was able to use its ability immediately because it's a fundamental? Now keep in mind you could build a helix right here because as long as you don't build it in the same timeline, you could build it here and still take advantage of its ability because it is a fundamental and it requires no dependencies. And in fact, that goes for all technologies. As long as it is 100% the dependencies are fulfilled on it, you could take advantage of its free action. The game would continue like this over the course of 4 rounds. At the end of that, the person who has the most legacy points would win. Now what I'm going to do is I am actually going to remove everything that we've got here, and I'm actually going to set this up and show you some of the free actions that you could possibly take on some of these new cards. First, let's take a look at our fundamentals. Remember, fundamentals require no dependencies for you to be able to take these free actions. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we make note of is that some of these lightning bolts mean that they are a free action. That means they can be used once per turn. However, some of them do not have the lightning bolt. Notice that the glyph writing does not. The reason is that this is a one-time ability that you're going to be able to take advantage of. A fundamental, when established, draw 2 cards. You will not be able to constantly take advantage of that with glyph writing. But if you noticed here, with Anima, you get to move to the time frame Tomb of Origins is established in. That is a future technology that you could possibly build. Arcfire. When established, if Arcfire exists in a future time frame, lose 1 legacy point. This is actually kind of a devious little card, and if you think about it, if you're familiar with Legacy Gears of Time, you could understand just how powerful that card could possibly be. My personal favorite is the Helix. Swap 1 influence cube for this with an influence cube on any other technology. The Time Jar. When established, you may move back 1 time frame if possible. That's nice for a free action. Pendulum. When established, you may discard an additional card to place an additional influence cube from your supply on this. Now it's important to remember the difference between supply and pool. Skyfork. When established, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Gem Cutting. Gain 1 legacy point. And last but not least of our fundamentals, the Focus Beam. Draw from the top 3 cards of the draw pile, keep 1, and discard the others. Now remember, that's a free action, so that means you can use that once per turn. Great way to stack up cards. Why don't we take a look at a few of the other ones? Here's a few free actions or when established abilities that you can take advantage of on technologies that require dependencies. The Antiquator allows you to move backwards in time any number of time frames. The Rustifier, you can decrease the reward by any technology by 1. The Star Scribing, discard your hand and draw 4 new cards. Time Gears, when established, if this is successful, move all influence cubes from future copies of Time Gears onto this. Very powerful. Gravity Carriage, swap all influence cubes between 2 successful technologies in the past. I really like this card. The Hollow Lattice, discard 2 cards, add 1 influence cube from the supply to your influence pool. The Gilding Cannon, increase the reward for any one technology by 1 if it is not already increased. The Luster Fountain. Gain 2 legacy points.
Thank you for watching. The intentions of this video was to teach you how to play Legacy Forbidden Machines, and I hope I accomplished that. If I missed anything or if there's anything more that you'd like added to it, by all means, list it below and I'll do my best to get it to you. Now, if you want my opinion on this game, by all means go check out the GreyElephant quick video. It's only 4 minutes long. That's quick. And I'll give you my opinion on what I think of this along with my wife's as well. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.